What is power? What is power is an existential question and a political question. One that, as economists, we can, I think, give perhaps the greatest contribution to answering, at least in our current times. Yeah, we were supposed to, okay. So, power has to do with the relations that connect the individual with the collective, each of us with the rest of the world. But, and there are two sides of it, let's say. There's freedom in the sense of independence, empowerment, and there's oppression on the other side. But in both cases, it implies a struggle. Power is the result of a struggle. Struggle for existence, first of all, against nature, against other species, against other members of our own species. It's a history of our evolution as a human race, really. Darwin uses this concept very often in on The Origin of a Species, and interestingly, he mutuates it from Malthus' law of wages. But it's not just a matter of the past. Not only because many still struggle to find food, find shelter, to defend themselves against aggression in this world, but also in terms of our society, our, let's say, civilization, if we can call it that way. What is going to happen if our environment changes? The metaphor is so obvious, as Jared Diamond. Easter Island, you know, the population got decimated eventually, is isolated in the Pacific Ocean the same way that we are isolated on planet Earth. If we ruin our own world, we won't be able to get help. But once existence, survival is not under direct threat, a different struggle might arise, which often interests the very same institutions that we had developed throughout our history and evolution to protect ourselves, because those institutions have become oppressive. I'm going to mention just three of those: family, state, and market. Family. So individuals have struggled against the institution of family over time to become independent individuals, to overcome the social roles that families have perpetuated, to set themselves free from from the socioeconomic origins of their families and what that meant for their lives. And this type of struggle has inspired policies like liberal policies to level the field, let's say like free public education or inheritance taxes. But also feminist policies to support women and children, their free decisions, making free choices about maternity, about work, about life. So policies like healthcare, free healthcare, or positive discrimination in labor market. And in that sense, the state can guarantee the possibility of freedom if one wants to be free. But of course, we know that the state can also be an instrument of oppression, and when and how it is, or it is instead an instrument of freedom, has been the question that has occupied the greatest minds of the past, very great mind of the past at least. Plato, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Beccaria, Locke, they all developed arguments that still resonate today, and this is quite impressive if you think about it. But today something is different, and not because of something that happened and changed just now, but very recently in the human history, if you think about it, and that's the Industrial Revolution and the development of the capitalist society. At that point, what happens is that the economic argument becomes really central in answering what state is and what state power is. And moral philosophers start considering that much of the relation between the individual and the collective goes through market mechanisms. So it is not the political power, but it is the circular functioning of the market that sets the laws of accumulation and social reproduction. So the old questions about the state needs to be reconsidered. For instance, what makes a nation stronger than the others richer, wealthier, right? So what eventually justifies or simply explains the fact that one nation has the power on the others, colonialism, imperialism. Also, the question of inequality ceases to be just a mere matter of ethics or moral, but it becomes connected to issues like economic waste. So this is, for instance, what Keynes says using Darwin's story about how giraffes got to have long necks. You probably heard about that. And he uses that as a metaphor. He says, we can't forget the sweet leaves which fall to the ground that are trampled underfoot in the struggle among giraffes to reach for the highest branches. But he also adds, to suggest social action for the public good to the city of London is like discussing the origin of species with a bishop 60 years ago. Which leads me to the next point. What does political power represent if it is the market that rules society at this point? And this is really a question that all schools of thought ask themselves and are very concerned about, not just the classics or Marx, but the marginalists as well. The new liberals are concerned about the power of the state and the capture of the state by special interests. Of course, however, all these schools of thought have different ways, different understanding of how the market works, and hence, as a consequence, how state relates to that and should relate to that. So we can distinguish two main approaches, and the definition of classical and neoclassical here is not too strict. The classical approach focuses on production and distinguishes social groups and categories based on the function, on their function in production. So you have financial capital, productive capital, and workers that all struggle for, compete for a share of income. And power stands with those who initiate the productive process. They, in fact, by investing, they determine the level of employment and income. But of course, capitalists also are constrained by the law of capitalism and face certain constraints and contradiction. For instance, the fact that wage is a cost individually for the capitalist, but is also a source of income for the whole economy, for the capitalist as a whole. So, in order to escape these contradictions, what happens is that the productive capital tends to be too financialized, that the rentierization that Keynes talks about, and that leads to equilibrium of chronic unemployment. On the other hand, so we see here that inequality is part of the functioning of the market, which implies that there is a struggle, there is a conflict, so not only in the political external element that is fundamental in determining the distribution of income, but more generally because of how the market works. The neoclassical approach instead believes that there focuses on allocation. According to them, there are individual claims over scarce resources, and power stands with those who have access to private information. So the market normally should work just fine, except when there are rigidities, the state intervenes, confusing and mixing up the signals of prices, or when, in some cases, there are market failures. Redistributive policies or other type of policies can set the incentive straight sometimes, but that happens only after the productive process has happened. Of course, you can choose what approach you like the most, or you can create a third, new, fourth approach, and that obviously would be great. However, you need to keep in mind a few things that unfortunately are not so clear in the discipline, although they have been clarified in the literature in an undebatable way at this point. And there are several actually of these questions, but I'm going only to mention two. The neoclassical theory of income distribution is wrong. There is no, the factors of production are not remunerated fairly based on their contribution to the production. So if you need to talk, if you want to talk about income distribution, you cannot use neoclassical theory. So go say this to Piketty, for instance. Loanable funds theory, that's the other huge problem that you need to keep in mind when you decide which approach you're going to use and what you're going to do with your studies. And well, that disregards the very basic fact that banks create money out of thin air. And they use the fantastic concept of natural interest rate. So this is wrong, and please go say it to Larry Summers. And in fact, not only this concept appears still in textbooks, in the literature, but also in textbooks, which leads me to the final point, the struggle against economic ideology. I think that whether they know it or not, economists always talk about power. And the problem is that either they don't know it or they don't say it. And the problem is that if we are unaware, careless, or dishonest about the normative assumptions, the methodological issues, and the power implication of our models, then we are offering bastard economics to the possibility of being captured, just like the state, from special interests. And how can we make economics an instrument of collective empowerment instead? Of course, this is a difficult question to answer. This is something we need to measure ourselves with. Of course, as I said before, there's a first big decision that one needs to make. There is, are you going to be methodologically rigorous? Are you going to be mindful about the assumptions of your models? Are you going to be explicit about them?